Hello YouTube, this is Neon, and today the topic of my discussion, the title of my talk, the title of my talk is going to be the most shocking thing I learned about Ebola. So, Ebola it's a virus that attacks the human body. I found out that it liquefies human organs, that it causes its victims to bleed from every orifice of their body prior to death. And in fact, this is not the most shocking thing that I learned about Ebola. I didn't even believe those facts until I had actually seen a person who had died from Ebola, and I could see that they were bleeding from their eyes, mouth, ears. It was just too much to believe. So the most shocking thing that I learned, in fact, is that the Ebola virus uses a substance that the human body normally uses to fight off viral infections and viruses. It uses this substance to actually kill us. Completely shocking. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about this, because this is what causes that liquefaction of human organs and this bleeding. It's one of the main things that causes this bleeding from all of the human orifices as it kills us. So really quickly, how viruses work is that typically, one way or another, they breach the cell wall, they inject their DNA or RNA into the cell. This RNA makes its way to the nucleus of the cell, inserts itself into the DNA in the nucleus of the cell. It takes over the cell in this way, causing the cell to produce more viruses, whereas the cell would normally perform functions that promote life. As the cell produces more and more viruses, eventually the cell bursts or ruptures, and it spills these viruses out so that they can now attack other cells. They may enter the bloodstream, and they could potentially attack cells anywhere in the body. So when this happens, the body, even as the cell is being taken over and killed in this way, the cell knows something's happening. And what the cell does is it produces this substance that I mentioned it's similar to bees. When a bee stings something that's near the hive to protect the hive or to protect itself, it dies because the stinger pulls out its entrails. But another thing that happens is a pheromone is released that causes all of the other bees to be hyperactive and hypervigilant and to attack as well. And this substance that I'm talking about in the human body that the cell releases, it's to warn other cells and to warn the body that it's under attack by viruses, so that the body knows to be on the lookout, to be ready to make antibodies, and to fight. Okay, that's what this substance normally does. However, some way the Ebola virus takes this substance, it changes its molecular nature, it changes its molecular structure, and it turns this substance in what one expert, I believe, referred to as microscopic razor blades that are circulating throughout the body now. What this new substance does is it cuts holes and tears into the blood vessels. Tiny blood vessels are particularly vulnerable to this new substance. Human organs are particularly vulnerable to this substance, this new substance. And organ membranes are particularly vulnerable. Some person said it's like death by 1,000 tiny stab wounds. this would be death by trillions of tiny stab wounds. As these little tears happen in the body, blood goes into these tears, it coagulates, and it tries to close these tears and to repair these tears. However, there's so many of them by the time the virus begins to take hold and begins to kill, that what happens is that whole organs, literally, as I said, they become liquefied, because you have an organ that now is made up of trillions of tiny tears and tiny, if you will, stab wounds throughout this organ on a three-dimensional level, that now the organ is nothing more than essentially coagulated blood. So if you've ever had a really bad bloody nose, you know that afterwards at some point you either blow your nose or you swallow, and there's a lot of coagulated blood. That's sort of the texture, almost gelatinous, that our organs become if, God forbid, we were a person, any person who was to die of Ebola. Scientists, they don't know how Ebola is able to do this. How is Ebola able to change the molecular structure of this chemical and make this chemical so lethal? They don't know. As of this documentary, they don't know how, but they have figured out that this is one of the ways that Ebola kills. Ebola, I believe, attacks blood cells. It does other things to kill as well, but this whole shocking thing that Ebola does with this substance that is intended to help us is one of the main ways that Ebola kills us. Again, utterly, utterly shocking. And I believe that soft tissue is also particularly vulnerable to this substance. And I believe that has a lot to do with why we have, maybe I shouldn't say we, but the beautiful people who have caught Ebola and have died in this way, why they bleed from every orifice. Of course, our orifices are made up of very soft tissue. So that has a lot to do with the hemorrhaging from all of these orifices. So very shocking. It did make the understanding of Ebola, of this virus, and how this virus does what it does, it made it make sense to me, because it was almost sci-fi when I first heard about it in the 90s. I didn't even believe the whole thing of the bleeding, like I said, until I saw pictures. So fascinating, shocking. I would not wish that my worst enemy were to die by Ebola. It's just awful, awful. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, share, comment commercials, recommend my videos, do one or more of those things. I will have more topic videos on Wednesdays. I will do more from coping to thriving with life videos on Sundays. I'll upload 2 videos a week. Best wishes.